Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Definitely takes some devoted, liberty-minded individuals to come out on a Friday night to Kennesaw State University to listen to a talk, but we're all really excited that Robin can make it down here and that he'll be giving us some of his time tonight to talk to us about the really important political paradigm that I think is becoming a little more diluted more and more as libertarianism kind of makes its way into popular mainstream culture. So we're really excited for that. A couple things real quick. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Daniel McCalla. I'm the Georgia State Chair for the Young Americans for Liberty. We're a national organization that started with about a couple dozen chapters in a few states, and today, in 2008, after the Ron Paul presidential campaign, and today we're about 650 chapters across all 50 states. So we've grown tremendously. I'd like to thank a couple people for getting Robin down here and helping organize this. The first would be Jen and Elizabeth, the new chapter presidents here at KSU. So if you do attend KSU, those are your points of contact for the Young Americans for Liberty chapter here. When all seemed lost because of the bureaucratic red tape that existed at Student Life, Javid Ona helped us out to secure this room, so thank you very much, Javid. And finally, Paul for getting Robin down here, for introducing him and making all the necessary introductions. So thank you to all of you for helping out. So I know on the I don't want anyone to think that we have any false advertising going on. Ben Swan was on the subject of the Facebook event. He was supposed to be here, but there was a scheduling conflict. His coordinator, the guy that does the schedule, kind of messed it up a little bit. But Paul and Robin were very dedicated to meet Ben, and so they all met in Atlanta earlier today. And Ben took Paul's iPhone and said, "Hey, I'm going to record an intro on your iPhone." So we uploaded it to YouTube just a couple hours ago, and I'll let Ben remotely take it from here.
Hey there guys, Ben Swan here. I'm with CBS 46 here in Atlanta now, and I'm really excited about what you guys are in store for tonight, because you're hearing from one of the great minds of liberty today. Robin Koerner is not just a brilliant guy, but he's passionate about liberty and what it means for people to live in a society where they as individuals are recognized as important and valuable. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so excited that he is featured on our side at Truth and Media. I'm excited that he's going to be speaking to you tonight. This guy, intellectually, he's way up here. So if you have questions at the end, don't be afraid to track him down and ask him, because I always do. But the bottom line is he's going to blow your mind about this thing called liberty, how it doesn't belong to us because we're Americans. It doesn't belong to us simply because of by virtue of some birthright that's been given to us. It's because we are humans. It is a human fundamental right and a right to liberty. Ladies and gentlemen, Robin Koerner.
Thank you. It's hard to follow Ben Swan, even after just like a 1 minute bit, because he's just so good at it. He's such a natural, isn't he? But actually, I'm not going to quite do that, because if you're in this room, you already have heard all the liberty talks, right? You know about the paradigm, right? There's a million speakers actually doing that now, which is good. I'm not going to talk to you about liberty. I'm going to talk to you about talking about liberty. Very different, right? So, the capsule for this talk. Anybody know this quote from Goethe? Goethe is like German for Shakespeare. We see only what we know. We see only what we know, not we know what we see, which is what most people assume most of the time, and we're going to discuss this at some length. We are going to discuss this at some length. Are we not going to discuss this? Oh, okay, we could. Okay. Excuse me. Right, here we go. I'm having slow computer. Right, good. Slow computer day fixed. Okay. We're in the social sciences department here, right? If you study social sciences at the university that I went to, they get you to read this book, which has nothing to do with social sciences. It's called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. Who in this room knows that book?
Thomas Kuhn.
Yeah? Not many. Interesting. Any social scientists or political scientists here? Yeah? No? Okay, interesting. The professors in the room, do you know this book?
I have to admit, not
No, oh, that's good. We like honesty. Honesty, basis of liberty. Good. Okay. I didn't study political or social science, by the way. I studied physics. That might come through a little bit. This book was written in 1962. Written by a historian of science, and arguably the most important book written in modern times in the philosophy of science. And it's a really short book, so if you're interested enough to be in this lecture, you probably want to buy it and read it in a bath, maybe 2 baths. It doesn't take long to read, it's a short book. Bath, that's British for bath, sorry. The reason this book is important, if you want to understand human knowledge in the most general sense, is that Thomas Kuhn, the author, really unpacks this concept of the paradigm. What is a paradigm? And a paradigm, as it says on the slide, it's really all of the concepts and the relationships between concepts that you use to see and know the world. It's all of the built-in assumptions, most of which you don't even know that you have. They're the meanings that are built into the very language you use to talk and think about the world. Okay, now, Kuhn was writing about scientific revolutions. And he was writing about scientific revolutions as the means by which knowledge increases, the sum of human knowledge progresses. And he was basically saying, look, it isn't linear. It goes like this. It's more kind of a step thing. And each step represents a paradigm shift, which is a term that you've all kind of heard commonly. Right? But he really talks about what does that mean. And the classic example of a paradigm shift, if you're a historian of science, is in physics. Now this will just be like the only really physicsy bit in the lecture, so bear with me. Okay, it's going to get easier and easier. Right? Physics. Einstein and Newton. Isaac Newton, mass. Mass is something fixed. Right? There are things in space which is fixed. It just ticks by. It doesn't matter what you do in time. Time doesn't change. It just ticks by, kind of at the rate of a second a second. Right? That's kind of our common sense view. Newton's physics, mass is fixed. Einstein comes along, relativity. Mass isn't fixed. Right? You accelerate something, it gets faster, it gets heavier. Its mass actually increases. Mass is related to energy. And none of this makes any sense in Newton. But they're using the same words. They're using the words mass, they're using the word space, they're using the words time. Okay. Now, they represent different paradigms. You can talk about the Newtonian world, all of these concepts and their equations which relate them, and the Einsteinian world and equations which relate them. Here's the important thing. These paradigms are incommensurate, which means they can't be translated directly one into the other. And if you're not already ahead of me, our political paradigms are incommensurate. You know how we're always pulling our hair out, that people on the left can't speak to people on the right can't speak to people on the left, and people who care about liberty, we can't do either of those, right? So I'm going to get here to like a bit of a philosophical, neurological, and psychological basis for why that's so, and then we're going to talk a little bit about, well, what to do. Is it all hopeless then? No, it isn't. How do we, once we know the basis, what then does it require us to do if we're interested in selling an idea? Because that's the business I'm in, and that's the business you're in, probably, if you're in this lecture hall. It's certainly the business if you want to save the country. You're in the sales and marketing business, so you need sales 101, and your product is liberty. Right? Okay. Mass and time and space in physics, all very well. It's a little bit abstract. Let's start to bring it a bit closer to home. The word home in English has no direct translation in any language. Not a one-to-one translation. Attached to home, many concepts, right? I'm staying at a friend of Paul's right now for the few days I'm in Georgia, and I can say without inaccuracy, when do we get home? To go back to the house of this woman who I've never met in my life, but that's home. Where you lay your head is home, right? Now, if you speak French, you can indicate that idea to a Frenchman, but you can't do it with one word. Okay, so in different paradigms, you have the same words that can actually mean different things. right? So people are using the same words, but different things are going on in their head. You can also have the same meanings that require different words, okay? But to translate French to English, you've kind of got to be able to stand outside both. So if we're in the liberty movement and we want to speak blue or red, right, left or right, we have to kind of develop this, and I'm going to kind of get to that. Another great example that's a little bit more political is another from language. I studied Chinese. I lived in Taiwan for a while. I studied Chinese. And the Chinese word for should, as in I should get up tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning, something I rarely do. Sometimes I should, is ingai. Ingai is should in Chinese, right? And you can translate English to Chinese should to ingai for like 2 or 3 years and you're going to be fine, right? So it looks like you're working with the same concept, the equivalent concept in the two different languages, until eventually you discover that they don't really mean the same thing at all, but it's really quite deep, right? What does the word should mean in English? The word should implies that there's some standard of behavior, maybe some moral system, by which a certain course of action is the right or the best thing to do. So should in England should in English is kind of presupposes a Judeo-Christian morality, right? Now the Chinese are Confucian. So in China, the word should, ingai, which is the nearest equivalent, I mean it is the same word, it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do, it means the thing that most causes harmony. That's a completely different concept, right? Now, you're not going to get the consequences of that initially, right? You can be going quite a long way until you discover, hold on, well, this person isn't getting what I mean. So now think about it. When America goes to the United Nations and we're going to talk to the Chinese about human rights, they've made a human rights concession, and they're doing it because, well, they're finally they're doing what they should do, right? And we kind of interpret that as some kind of politico-moral win. Well, the Chinese did do something they should do. They just brought some harmony, right? They brought some harmony. And when I say brought some harmony, I mean it in that way. Because it's a trade, right? It's a much more transactional culture too, very different. So again, the difference between paradigms, like the substrate, the complex substrate, the relations among concepts, really important. Okay, I think that's good for now. Let's move on to the next slide. Now, Koerner made a really strong claim. He said that to all intents and purposes, when your paradigm changes, your world changes. Right? He didn't say the way you interpret your world changes. He said if your paradigm changes, your world changes. So this is really important. You can't think except through words, right? What came first, understanding or words? Thinking or speaking, right? Basically, now by the way, this isn't a statement about absolute morality. We're not making a theological point here. This isn't like moral relativism. This is saying, in our physical realm, using the brains as we do, given the resources we have, the way our brains are wired, we cannot fully experience anything objectively. There are objective truths, 2 + 2 is 4, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about things that are complex, things that are seen, things that we can argue about. Okay. Now, there was a great experiment done about this in 1949 in Harvard, and it was called the Perceptions of Incongruity experiment. And it was a really simple experiment. The scientists flashed playing cards at subjects, one at a time, at high speed, and the subject had to call out the card, right? So 3 of hearts, Jack of spades, King of diamonds, okay? Easy to do, except what the subjects didn't know is that occasionally in the deck was slipped a card where the red and the black was switched. So they were seeing a red King of spades, right? Or a black 3 of hearts. Now these subjects were wired up to equipment that measured stress responses. All right, so we're measuring heart rate, we're measuring sweat on the skin, these kind of things. Now what did they call out? When you see a black 3 of hearts, what do you see? Well, what do you say? You say either 3 of hearts, or 3 of spades, or 3 of clubs. Why? Because Goethe's right. You see only what you know. They know they're looking at playing cards. So this is really critical. When you see that playing card, you don't look at a playing card and do some analysis, right? If I show you a playing card, no, you don't. You actually see it immediately as the three of spades or whatever. And so Kuhn, this is Kuhn kind of neurologically now, right? What we know determines what we perceive. So in that way, when your paradigm changes, your world changes. So we are in the business of, if we're selling liberty or in fact any kind of ideas that fit in any way in a complex paradigm, we're actually in the business of changing perception. And that, as we're about to see, is the business of rewiring brains. We're actually changing hardware, right? Not just software. Okay, now, so let's bring it right to politics. So in 2006, 45% of Republicans stated that Iraq had WMDs, and 28% said they'd been found. Okay? It's just wrong, right? You just can't go out and look at the data in 2006 and come to that view, unless you know it must be true for some paradigmatic reason. We'll get to it, right? Similarly, 1968, as the Soviets were rolling into Hungary and Czechoslovakia a few hundred miles away, the French communists believed, and it was surveyed time and time again, it just wasn't happening. And I'm saying to you, they weren't lying. They had to believe that. We're talking, of course, about cognitive dissonance, right? Now, in the spirit of this, here's a headline from the Drudge Report. You all know the Drudge Report, right? Okay. This was a headline, it's a few years old, this headline. Iran test fires missile that can reach Israel. That's the exact headline, and I can tell you that it was accurate, it was factually correct. So, this is the interactive bit, or the first interactive bit. Can anybody tell me, in the spirit of what I've said so far, what's wrong or problematic about that headline? Yeah? Yeah.
It implies that it's being shot at Israel.
Okay, so what does that imply? I mean, yeah?
That Israel's under attack.
Do you think it actually implies that it's being shot now? I don't know that it does it? That can reach Israel. It's not saying it's on its way.
Different people interpret this differently.
Okay. Unpack that a little bit?
That
No?
it's designed to reach Israel.
Right, designed to reach Israel. Okay.
This has a range. They're just putting Israel. It's not.
Right.
For me, it doesn't cause a problem.
Okay, excellent. Right, so why did he put Israel? Right, Drudge being American and his readers being American, why did he put Israel?
It brings their attention.
Okay, do you think he did it like with that, like a kind of manipulative intent?
Sells eyeballs.
Second?
It sells eyeballs.
Okay.
People care about Israel.
Okay. Do you think he actually thought, okay, I can choose any country in the range? No, he didn't. He didn't actually go through that process, did he? If you're American, you believe that the main geopolitical conflict in the Middle East is what?
Israel.
Right, Israel versus, pretty much Israel versus the Muslims, Jews versus Muslims, right? That ain't it. What is it? It's the Persians and the Arabs. Okay, so this was true, but it's not the meaning of what happened, right? Wrong paradigm. He wrote this because he's in that paradigm too. He's an American, right? So what does this really reflect? This doesn't tell you what actually happened. It doesn't tell you the meaning of the event. It tells you what the prevailing paradigm is, right? That's a subconscious phenomenon. We're all victims of our paradigm. Now, of course, if you've been to this lecture, now you know this, you can start to work yourself out of the paradigm. We'll talk a bit about that. But even at the, again, this is the level at which we're getting the information, right? And I mean, maybe Drudge was being manipulative, but I'll give him that he wasn't. But of course, all of our paradigms come out, all of our headlines, right, come out of this, right? We're all American. Well, there's one person in the room who isn't, yeah. He's been trying for 11 years, but we'll get there in the end. But basically, we're all American, right? So by being, we're in an American cultural paradigm, a national paradigm. As Americans, we have so much in common, and all of the headlines are reflecting that. Now, I really know that because a few years ago, 11 years ago, I set up a website called watchingamerica.com, and we translate foreign opinion, commentary, and editorials about the United States from all over the world. Right? And guess what? They look like they're from completely different countries, because they are. Right? The meaning of the meaning that's read into the events, and I don't mean consciously, I mean subconsciously, is completely different. Because these people are observing certain phenomena from different paradigms, and our current thoughts reflect our paradigms. Yes?
But it's also coming from a bias.
Yes, it is. I'm not saying anybody's standing outside a paradigm. I'm just saying we're all in one. Okay, we're not all in one. We're all in many, perhaps an infinity, depending on how you want to define it. Yeah. But we have to know what, at the level at which the bias is working, right? Like, oh, the media is all liberal bias, whatever. Okay, maybe it is, yeah. Well, actually, we were in CNN yesterday. It is. I heard it from the horse's mouth. Okay. I won't give you the name of who said that, but yeah. Anyway, and actually that might be an interesting chat for drinks later, right? The nature of how that's perpetuated. But the bias is also completely unconscious. It's just kind of built into our nature, right? So that's really important. Now, the really important thing about this, and this speaks to a huge point that Koerner makes, supercritical, is our paradigms always cause us to perceive in a way that reinforces the paradigm. Positive feedback, right? Here you go. Oh, look, here's another headline about those Muslims making missiles to fire at Jews. Oh, look, paradigm reinforced. Okay.
Confirmation bias.
Yes, yeah, related to that, absolutely. Okay. Well, I think I've said this. Now, we're going to get onto the left versus right paradigm. Because we have our American paradigm, right, or lots of paradigms, but the one that we're dealing with politically, broadly speaking, is left versus right. So we're going to unpack that in a minute. But first, I want to just kind of unpack a little bit this idea that they're hardwired, right? That we're doing a little bit of neurology here. So next interactive bit of our little session. What is that on the screen? This is not a trick question. What is that? Just call it out. A line.
A blank.
What?
A blank.
You're trying to be too clever. It's a line. What direction is it pointing?
Horizontal.
Horizontal line. Are you all good with the horizontal line? No dissent, right? Okay, what's that?
I'm in agreement.
Second?
I'm not necessarily in agreement.
That's
Go ahead.
kind of wise man. What's that? Two? Parallel?
Pong paddles.
Lines? Yeah. What? Come on, this is easy stuff, really? How many universities? Kennesaw State really going down the path? This is two horizontal parallel lines. I mean, parallel being redundant because they're both horizontal. Are we all good? Yes. Okay, so this is not a trick, isn't it? Okay, so what's this one, guys?
Two parallel.
Right, what's this one? Square, right. Everybody says square, which is what it is. Nobody says two pairs of parallel lines, one horizontal, one vertical, joined at their ends. Even though that's exactly what you've just seen and how we got to it, right?
That's the way they say it in Chinese, though, right? Two vertical lines, two horizontal lines.
Do you know, I don't know. Might be. So why am I doing this? Isn't this a little banal? Because when you see that, there are synapses, and we can stick you in a brain scanner now, high-resolution brain scanner, and actually measure this. There are synapses firing for vertical, horizontal, pair, but there's a separate set of synapses firing for square. That concept square is learned and it's ingrained. It's now hardwired. So you can't see that two pairs of parallel lines joined at their ends without seeing a square, right? Unless, of course, now you're hearing this, you kind of stare at it for long enough and you try. Like, you know, sometimes you stare at a word for long enough, you look at a word and you immediately get the meaning. You don't interpret. You don't go, okay, so that's a J and a U and a G and a G, so that's a jug. You don't do that. You just look at it and it's immediately jug. Similarly, immediately square. Look at the jug word long enough, you can deconstruct it into the letters, but you have to do that. It's a positive action. This is what we need to get people to do when we're selling political ideas. Get it? This is why it's hard. This is why it's hard. So what about the political paradigms? Well, now it's not usual in Liberty talks that we quote Chomsky, but Chomsky's a bit of a dude, and he was being a real good bit of a dude when he said this. The smart way to keep people passive and obedient is to strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion. Heads are nodding already, but allow very lively debate within that spectrum. Okay? We see this on Fox, CNN, MSNBC all the time, right? Even encourage the more critical and dissident views. That gives people the sense that there's free thinking going on. while all the time the presuppositions of the system, which I've put in bold, are being reinforced by the limits put on the range of the debate. We see this all the time, right? What are the Republicans and the Democrats disagreeing about? That gets all the attention. We know that they agree about the monetary system, the military intervention, the elimination of the Bill of Rights, right? It's what they agree about. That's the important paradigm for our purposes, right? Well, it's the important paradigm for the future of our country. Okay. The presuppositions of the system, as Chomsky called it, is really just another way of saying the paradigm, right? It's the unconscious implied concepts implied in all the discussions we have. Okay. So let's do left versus right. So this is the first hour of a day of this stuff. So it gets kind of like super interesting and super deep and super detailed. But this will give you a taste. These terms left and right, let's actually look at the language. What do these like do in our head? Yeah.
Are you assuming this is intentional or unintentional when you go into talking about it?
The bit I'm saying now, I think this is unconscious. Like, we're not aware all the time that when we use the terms left and right, we're trying to manipulate. I mean, we're not. Most people who use these terms most of the time are not trying to manipulate. And they're a shorthand. And so, I mean, they have use. I'm not saying they don't have use, right? But we need to, it's like having a tool that has side effects or a pill that has side effects, right? We need to know the side effects as well as the main intent. So that's, so no, I'm not speaking to intent here. I'm not saying anything's nefarious, right? I'm just saying we have to discover, we have to understand cognitive and neurological reality if what we're trying to do is deal in cognition and changing people's minds, right? So left and right. If I stand here, everything is to my left or to my right. Left and right covers all space. It's built into the concept of left and right. Okay, so again, politically, we lazily use the terms, and built into that is, if we have heard from the left, or we have the left view and we have the right view, we've now covered all of political space about an issue, right? No? We know no, right? Now, we might think, and we might be right, that our views that we may say don't sit in that spectrum are being kept out by the powers that be, and as I say, we might be right. But they're also being kept out unconsciously by the concepts that are being used all the time. Concepts that we're all going to use, your liberal friends, your conservative friends, regardless of whether they're tuning into Fox or MSNBC and having this stuff perhaps intentionally done to them, right? So we know that there are ideas that are outside left versus right. So here we are, the left versus right paradigm. It's a paradigm that limits our perception and stops us from seeing reality, right? Left versus right, what else are they? They're opposing. They cover all space and they oppose each other. Okay, so again, right? They put the Republican and the Democrat on, and it's like, oh, we have the opposing views. Well, we don't have opposition, do we? If we have all those shared assumptions, right? The military intervention, I mean, go down the list, right? The monetary system and all the things that we care about in this room. But our language, our paradigm, the paradigm in which we all operate, stops us seeing these truths. People we're dealing with, they can't perceive, let alone interpret the truths. Okay. Now, any scientists in the room? Okay. So here I use the word symmetrical. Left and right have a symmetry. To not use technical terms, left and right are the same kind of thing, right? We don't say left and tree, or right and green, right? I mean, we say red and blue for politics, right? But we don't say left and red. You with me? Okay. The point being left and right, being the same kind of thing suggests that people on the left, when they're being political, are doing the same thing or being the same thing as people on the right when they're being political, right? Same kind of language, same group of concepts that we're using to describe each. But we know better than that, don't we? I know this is a bit confusing, but I'm going to clear it up right now. Everybody here's pretty much liberty movement, right? More or less. Okay, you've seen this. You've seen all of your lefty friends think that all your conservative friends are what? Heartless, bad. And you've seen all your conservative friends think that your lefty friends are what? Bad? No. Stupid. Seen that? No? Nods of recognition? Right. So there's an asymmetry here, isn't there? There's an asymmetry here. Whatever those people on the left are doing when they're doing politics and looking across the room at their conservatives, right? is not the same thing as what the Conservatives are doing when they look across the room and see what the Liberals are doing, right? And why? Because we all interpret, we all interpret from our own paradigm, because we're kind of stuck with that, right? So, what are the politics of the left? If I'm a progressive, what basically, and again, I'm generalizing crassly, I haven't got a lot of time, so I have to do this. The politics of the left are the politics of good intention. We know that, right? Politics of the left are politics of good intention. So, if I'm a liberal, let's say, and I used to be a liberal by default, that's kind of where I come from. I had no interest in politics before 2010. Okay, and the fact that I come from, I guess, the left by default is evidenced by the fact that my contribution to liberty started on the Huffington Post, right, the well-known lefty mainstream media. So I'm of the left, I see that there's law, I see that there's government, I know I'm a good person, so obviously what do I want to do? I want to use government and law, because it's a given, to instantiate my good intentions, and if I'm doing that, I'm doing good, that's good politics, good policy. Right? Stands to reason. I'm not trying to take your freedom away, actually. I'm not in that paradigm. I'm a good guy. There are these things out there I can use to do good stuff and bad stuff with. So I'll just like instantiate the good stuff. Politics of good intention. Good politics is good intention politicized. If I'm a liberal. So if that's what I'm doing, if somebody's vociferously opposing me and I know I'm a good guy and that's why I'm standing here, then that guy must be the opposite of me. He's a bad guy. But if I'm a conservative, I don't believe it works that way. I don't believe law and government are tools that can effectively instantiate and manifest good intention, right? And maybe I might say I know better than that. So to look at the outcome of policy, I actually have to look at the outcome of policy, not the intention behind it. Okay? So for me, that's more, you've got policy removed at least a few steps from morality, from intention. I'm making more intellectual assessments about policy, perhaps, if I'm a conservative. So for me, it's about being right or wrong. This works, this doesn't. Intention not being enough of a justification. So from where I sit, if I can see this works, and you're vociferously promoting an opposing view, you're the opposite of me. I'm smart and knowledgeable, you're dumb. Okay, again, it's me interpreting where you sit through my paradigm. Does that make sense? Okay, so you could say that liberal politics works on a moral stroke intentional axis, conservative politics works on a functional one. Yeah, there's lots of questions I know this throws up, and there's lots of yeah buts, I know that. But as I said, I want you to get the sense that we're all in paradigms, right? And these are dominant paradigms in our political discourse. Okay, now, we can't talk to the left unless we can meet them in this paradigm. Right? We can't talk to the right unless we can meet them in their paradigm. Okay. Most important, and it's an obvious thing. So I'm going to say a few things in this hour, and when I say them, they're going to be obvious. Right? People's minds are not changed by logical argument. But you will go back and have a political argument on Facebook and try and change somebody's mind with a logical argument. Right? You'll do it. You can't stop yourselves, right? I want to stop you, because you really do have better things to do, especially after you've heard this talk. Okay. Minds are not changed by logical argument, they're changed by emotional consent. This is super important. If you take away a little one-liner from this talk, apart from Goethe, who's cool, remember this. Judgment and justification are completely different processes in the brain. Your judgment comes out of your paradigm that's going to be informed by many, many more things than, deductive logic from indisputable axioms. All right, now, even those libertarians, by the way, who tend to be more analytical. I mean, until a long time ago, 80% of libertarians were all white male computer programmers, right? Okay, so they would always have a quite convincing retrofit logic to whatever their views were. Even they, if you put them in their brain scanners, at the point of changing their mind, it's an emotional phenomenon. Let me explain. Okay, I'll just read this out. During the run-up to the 2004 presidential election, while undergoing an fMRI brain scan, 30 men half self-described as strong Republicans and half as strong Democrats were tasked with assessing statements by both George Bush and John Kerry, the presidential nominees obviously, in which the candidates clearly contradicted themselves. This is important because it means the logical content of the statement was 2 + 2 = 5 in every case. Okay. In their assessments, Republican subjects were as critical as Kerry as Democratic subjects were of Bush, yet both let their own candidate off the hook. Obviously, can't be logical argument, can it? This is what's going on in the brain. The fMRI brain scan shows us that this is what happens when you listen to your guy or your opponent contradict himself. The first thing is you're processing emotions. Well, you're having an emotional response because you're either listening to someone who's on your side and you like, and that gives you a certain set of feelings, or on the wrong side and you might hate. Now you're stuck first, then you hear the contradiction. Now you have a cognitive dissonance thing. If you're a Republican and you hear Bush, or you're a Democratic and you hear Kerry contradict himself, you have cognitive dissonance. There's an internal conflict. There's a certain part of the brain that handles that, and it lights up. So how do you resolve the conflict? Well, the part that handles judgments about moral accountability comes into play immediately. The moral accountability rests on the man you're listening to, right? What tribe does that guy belong to, right? At some level, I give like a whole hour about how all politics basically are the politics of identity. But this really is politics of identity. Do I identify with this guy, or do I identify with this guy? Kerry, I'm a Republican, he can't be trusted, right? Bush, I can trust him, moral accountability is in play. What happens is, there is some kind of resolution, right? So my guy, well, he was just a slip of the tongue. The other guy, he's an idiot, right? That might be it, right? Some more sophisticated people might need to do a little bit better than that to resolve their cognitive dissonance. But when they have, it's a dopamine hit. It's like taking drugs. So not only are we hardwired to see the world as we're hardwired to keep it that way, right? We get rewarded for keeping it that way. And nothing at all in the bit of your brain that actually does logic. 30 men each side, consistent result. Okay, so again, stop with the Facebook already, okay? All right, so this won't surprise anybody, okay? NSA surveillance, probably something dear to the hearts of everyone in this room, I hope, certainly dear to mine. 2006 January, so Bush is in power, 75% of Republicans, it's acceptable, right? No, but majority of Democrats aren't acceptable. And of course, same thing, you might say the programs got worse, although I think this was just before Snowden, I think. And you know, you can see the change in the numbers, right? So it's about your team, it's about your team, it's about your team. It's politics of identity. Right. So if people's minds are changed by emotional consent, the first thing to do is not to get them to resist you emotionally, right? Facebook? Okay. So the first thing, don't make people wrong. Don't make people wrong. Don't tell someone why they're wrong. Yeah. Now, the reason I'm standing here today, ultimately, is in 2011, I wrote an article on the Huffington Post called "If You Love Peace, Become a Blue Republican," just for a year. Huffington Post has an audience of, I mean, you might say center, but to left, right? Pretty much all Obama voters. I was very delighted when Obama got in 2008, by the way. Okay, hands up, did that. And I still think Bush and the Republicans at the time had to be punished, so I don't know what the good outcome then would have been. But in my article I said, my good liberal friends, you voted against Bush and for Obama because you love civil rights, you thought, because you're against crony corporatism, you thought, and because you don't like unnecessary wars and killing innocent kids in the Middle East. All good reasons. So now stay true to those good liberal principles by voting for the one nominee in the race that has a track record on them, who happens to be an old white conservative Republican who's called Ron Paul. Now, that article went viral. And, you know, and kind of people start finding out about me, and now I'm here talking to you, the great state of Georgia. So what I did with that article is I started by making them right. Mass affirmation. Affirmation, not in ways that might appeal to me based on my politics, but in ways that appeal to them based on their own paradigm, right? Politics of good intention, remember? Left, so good intention, good intention, good intention. So I wasn't in the business of that article of changing anybody's mind, was I? I was in the business of saying, you are so right, and because you're right, just run with it, right? So I wasn't in the business of changing anybody's mind, I was in the business of clarifying people's mind. Right? Because guess what? Here's another little secret thing. No one gives a flying about what you think. They all give a flying about what they think. Okay? So we're in a kind of, if we're doing the art of political persuasion, we're kind of providing a cognitive, and maybe even an emotional service, right? We're helping people explore what their paradigm better. So what we really want to do is look at the bit of their paradigm that's inconsistent with another bit of their paradigm, and that's our in, right? So of course in the article I was saying, you know what, and I actually said, look, this is what Bush did that you voted against, and then in a paragraph that was identical in the structure of each sentence, the entire paragraph, Bush replaced with Obama, and there it was. And it was just like, there it was. So we're not offering something, we're not forcing something, we're offering something. Okay? And this, like, libertarians, like, it really upsets me, because we're just, like, so bad at this. Okay? People first. People first. Okay? So this is really about establishing the common ground. So all of that stuff about left versus right, and what I talk about, you know, if you kind of hire me to speak to you for like a whole day, is really understanding how to get to the common ground in a bit more kind of a detailed fashion than just that left versus right matrix I showed you. But you know, there's an adage in sales which sums this up nicely, and I say, we're in the sales and marketing business and our product is liberty, okay? Seek first to understand, only then to be understood. And a good way to do that is just to catch yourself, you know, when you're about to go, you know, blah, blah, blah. Okay, just catch yourself. Do I care about showing that I'm right now, or do I actually care to understand this person? Do I actually care about this person as a person? You can train yourself to do it. Again, if you want to, we're in the business of taking somebody on a journey, right? If you're taking someone on a journey, there's only one place you can start, and that's where he is. Because if you want to start there because it's closer to the end, or because it's a place you prefer, that's fine, but he ain't with you. Okay, so it's all obvious. Again, it should all be obvious, but we don't do it. Now, again, good salesmen do this all the time. You've got to tell someone what they're thinking. That's what I did in that article. You don't tell them what they should be thinking. That's what we usually do, right? Okay, let me explain it to you. If I explain it to you, then you'll think this way. The implication being, you're wrong, come here. Okay, now, in Britain right now, there's an interesting political phenomenon called UKIP, United Kingdom Independence Party. Have you heard of it? Okay, cool, okay. Now, I'm not here to say they're a libertarian party, although I have interviewed their chairman on my show a couple of times, and he's a libertarian, he's definitely a smaller libertarian. They're a bit populist, but that's kind of not the point. The point is, how did they go from not existing 23 years ago to getting 14% in a national election and actually winning the European election last year? 0 to a win of a national election, the European election. The biggest British contingent in the European Parliament is UKIP, which wants to abolish the European Parliament, right? How did they do that? Well, if you go to their website, they don't say, we're libertarian, and this is what it means, right? And go and read The Creature from Jekyll Island. They don't say that. What they've done is, they've just, since they've been their inception, they have found one issue that the people are already concerned about, that is not being reflected back anywhere from the mainstream establishment. That issue in Britain is Europe, and relatedly, immigration. Donald Trump is going on here. Interesting topic for another time. Okay. The establishment can't talk about those things, or rather they're on the same side of that issue, and there are things happening in the country that are legitimately causing concern. All the UKIP does is call it. Donald Trump, calling it. Doing pretty well on that, isn't it? It works every time. Because you're in my paradigm and I can trust you if you can say to me what I'm thinking. You've just signaled that you're where I am. Right? Now, it was interesting because I was in England just before the election, and so because it's what I do, so I was asking people who were sympathetic to UKIP or were going to vote UKIP. Most of whom, by the way, like the overwhelming majority didn't vote for UKIP before. Right, because UKIP wasn't even, it was such a minor party, like no one even considered voting for it at the preceding general election. Right, so all of these people come to UKIP, and what do they say? They don't say, well, I agree with them on this issue. They say, this is a concern. They're the only people talking about it. That's profound, right? who you are, your identity, whether you bridge someone on intent, on shared concern, is what do you choose to talk about? And we'll come back to this. Not necessarily what you say about it. Okay. Again, it's all sales. Libertarians, people will tell you how to sell them if you shut up and let them tell you. Okay. Now, I had Grover Norquist on my show. He's been important in politics, and whether you think he's a libertarian or not, but he sounds a lot more liberty now than he used to, though. He says all the right things. And he said this. He said, actually, it was kind of interesting as an aside, he said there already is a liberty coalition, sorry, a liberty majority in the United States. At the ballot box, there is already a majority for liberty, but the issue on which each person is liberty is different for different people, right? So he made this point. He said, if you shut up, they'll tell you what the issue is, you sell them liberty on that issue, and then you stop selling. Okay? You've all unmade, no, maybe you haven't all, but I've seen it a lot, right? Oh yeah, you get, again, The Creature from Jekyll Island, go and read this book. Oh my God, he's one of those libertarian freaks. I don't get that, I'm not interested, right? But they were going to vote with you because they didn't want their vaping taxed. Interesting, right? One of the most successful liberty movements going on, and if you call it a movement, like sub movements going on in the US right now, are the vapors. Not the actual vapor, the people who vape, right? Because they were vaping and they weren't paying tax on whatever it is they put in those things. And now the states, like state after state, go to regulate tax, right? You can't take something from someone that they already think they have. Okay, it's hard to do. And it's something like, I don't know what the numbers are, and you can go to my show, I spoke about it with Norquist and get the right numbers, but it's something like in 41 out of 43 states, that community has defeated the tax on the vape stuff. Okay, it's interesting. Okay, so Grover Norquist is saying, those guys, you can get them to vote, I mean, you might not get them to vote LP, but you might get them to vote for the Liberty candidate, let's say, in the Republican Party, right? Because, paradigm's sticky, and I'm a Republican, that's my political identity, it's for another day. But you might get them to vote for that guy because you've got them on their issue. And as Norquist said, everybody basically votes on one, maximum 2 issues. UKIP proved it. Okay, UKIP have proved it. And I say UKIP proved it. You can go through history, pretty much, I think, through Anglo culture and Anglo politics, by which I mean the English-speaking world, and you'll see this time and time again. And of course, by telling someone what they're thinking, you're establishing the trust, the sense of shared identity, that's going to shift someone from a mindset of, must I believe this? Right? So if I'm a liberal, I'm listening to a conservative, I'm like, I know he's a conservative, must I believe this? Like, do I have to, is there something he's saying that's going to force me over, right, to the opposite, which is, can I believe this? If you're in my paradigm, and we've already established that, then the trust is there, then it's like it's a gestalt switch. Okay, so before we can sell our liberty philosophy, we have to get people listening to us, not thinking, must I believe it, but can I believe it, right? And we do that by establishing the shared ground. Okay, so there's some other little tricks that we can use. And you can use them speaking to people, and you can use them when writing. Okay, so again, salesmen talk about reflecting the customer. The customer shifts to the left in the seat. The salesman mirrors it. You must have seen this, like on movies or on YouTube videos or something. Well, the equivalent in politics is use the vocabulary and the style of the people that you're trying to, whose minds you're trying to share. Right? Conservatives and libertarians almost vomit when they hear the word social justice or economic justice. Doesn't cost you anything. Use the word economic justice. Do it, right? Because by doing that, you're saying, I respect you, and I respect the intention that's driving your engagement in this discussion. You want economic justice. You don't concede anything by doing that. Right? You haven't conceded that the free market is not the best way to establish economic justice, right? But instead we're scared by the symbols of the other paradigm. Don't we? We've got to do the opposite, we've got to embrace them. Social justice, the same, right? That's just an example. And it also works kind of subconsciously. If somebody starts talking to you about, I don't know, Well, yeah, okay, I mentioned Jekyll Island. If somebody talks to you about Jekyll Island, if you're a libertarian, he may not even, he could be a neocon or a liberal, but your best guess in that moment, you're going to hear the next sentence as if he's one of us. What's he giving you? Nothing. Right? This is what I do all the time. Okay, it works. Right? Now the next one, so meet the objection up front. Okay, so I studied epistemology at university. That was my master's degree, right? Which is like the philosophy of knowledge and belief, and some of that's in here. But I'm also teaching a lot from my first experience as an adult in the United States, which was door-to-door sales. Okay, and they shipped me off to Nashville for 4.5 days and gave me this super intense sales course, and then I went off to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, who knew, and sold books, and it was the most awful thing I've done in my life, and I'm so glad I've done it, because I learned so much, right? And one of the things they taught me down there in Nashville before they sent me to Harrisburg on a dirty bus was meet the objection up front. This works kind of like magic, and to explain it would take longer, but maybe if you're interested you can check it out for yourself. I was selling books to help kids out with their homework that cost $65 each for a book. Okay, it's the same price for a book, right? So so I knew that the objection I would get from everybody who's trying to sell these books to was price. Price is going to be there might be others. Price was going to be an objection. So what I had to do was get to price before they did. Get to price before they did. So what I do is I say these books do this. Other things that do this are the full set of Encyclopedia Britannica, and that'll cost $300 and whatever dollars, right? Whatever. So God, how cheap is 65 to get all of that? Reframed it. The reframing, though, is kind of secondary to meeting the objection up front. If you get to the objection before the other person does, it diffuses it. Right? It diffuses it. Because everybody in that mindset of, must I believe it? They're looking for the trigger. They're looking for the one thing that they're going to go, oh yeah, but, and then they can dismiss you. Okay, so for example, when I was writing the Huffington Post article, and I did that bit that I explained, if you love peace, become a blue Republican just for a year, what's the objection that you know every faintly liberal progressive person's going to have against Ron Paul? Like, it's the welfare state. He's going to take down the welfare state. He doesn't care. It's that whole, you capitalist bastards. It's that one. Okay. So after I did that bit, the very next paragraph, before they have a chance to think about it, is, I know obviously that welfare is a concern for those of us who are more liberal bent, and do we honestly feel that the one-size-fits-all federal delivery of welfare is the best possible system to establish the ends that we want to establish? Or could there be a better way? Is that something worth looking into? Okay, so that was me meeting the objection up front, and it worked really well. Again, I didn't concede anything by doing that. I'm not conceding a principle by doing that. Okay. I mean, this one's so obvious, it should probably be at the top. Don't impugn your opponent's integrity or moral character, right? It may be true that in your paradigm, saying X and Y together would make you inconsistent or bad, but from where he's sitting, 2 + 2 might equal 5, as it looks to you, going back to Koerner, okay? Because even you will see a red 3 of hearts when they show you a black 3 of hearts, okay? And even you, even us, right? We're not right on everything. We're not consistent on everything, and we're not good on everything. Okay, so that's just an obvious one. Don't do that. It just speaks back to the last slide, and you're looking for the common ground. You're not trying to make someone wrong. Impugning someone's integrity or moral character, or just their intelligence, is obviously worse than even making them wrong on an issue. And this is a choice. You can always find disagreement of principle, and you can always find agreement of principle. We're all human beings. We have so much in common. So much in common. And you can find it, what you focus on gets bigger. Or you can just go to the reasons why that guy's stupid and what he believes is going to destroy the country. You can choose. You can choose where to start that conversation. No one has ever been persuaded by someone they don't respect. So the first thing you have to do is establish that respect. They have to feel that you respect them, and then they're going to respect you enough to go from must I believe it to can I believe it. Okay. So which means, by the way, that if you're tabling at your YAL table, and some screaming lefty comes by and tells you that you are an evil bastard and all of that, then you don't win by getting out the entire libertarian canon in the 5 minutes that you have speaking as fast as you can. You win by giving them a nice experience where they get respected by someone who's not in their paradigm. And it may be for the next libertarian, or maybe 10 later, to get through the crack, to find the crack and get in. That's better, but it's better. Okay. Subvert expectation, this is another one. If somebody thinks that you're a conservative and you say that you care about economic justice, and by the way, you do if you care about the free market, you subvert their expectation immediately. Right? Well, hold on, what paradigm are you in now? Okay, I don't get to just shoot the wall up. When I was going door to door, it was amazing actually. I had this bag of books, right? And I was walking up, someone's, they have no solicitation, now I am soliciting. Everyone can see what you are. So what you're looking for is opportunities to subvert the expectation. So if mum is in the garden doing the weeds, go and help mum do the weeds. Salesmen don't help mums do the weeds in their garden, right?
Good one does.
How good, what?
A good one does.
A good one does, exactly, because a good one gets all of this, right? And also, by the way, that establishes a point in common, doesn't it? Because then the first thing we're going to be talking about is weeds, not will you buy this from me? Point in common, right? Everybody loves their children, right? Everybody cares about paying for their home. Everybody's worried about getting promotion, whatever it might be. Right? It's the point of human contact. Ask questions. Ask questions because then you'll find out how to sell something. But just ask questions because if you're smart, you're going to be more persuasive, of course, when you lead someone to the answer that you want them to have. And again, you all know this. You've probably all done it, but you forget it all the time. Right? So just practice it. Each one of those little opportunities that you get, see it as an opportunity to get better at this. You're not trying to just get out the philosophy in the most consistent way possible. Okay. So a nice example of this, and it is just an example, I can choose many, it's Penn Jillette. Penn Jillette, good liberty guy, solid guy. He's got this nice line. Could we solve this problem by increasing freedom rather than reducing it? Okay, this incorporates some of these ideas. It's quite clever. Okay, I don't know if he's thought of it this way, but here's why it's good. First of all, it's a question versus a statement, which makes it collaborative, not combative, right? If I make a statement, if you disagree with me, we're already in conflict. And I've given myself a very specific thing I have to defend. Something specific is hard to defend. What do I have to defend in this statement? Nothing at all. Okay? And now I'm doing something with the person I'm talking to. Now that person might be, obviously, let's say a progressive. Interestingly, and with respect to this, by the way, you might object, well, it kind of presupposes a desire for freedom. Okay, obviously, different paradigms, that word has different meanings for us, like mass in Einstein and Newton, right? But that word is common ground, right? So let's start from that word. By the way, if you do one of those kind of Google analyses thing on the uses of the word liberty over the last year or two, you'll find a massive peak of its use by people who were for the gay marriage decision, right? So the people on the left who we usually say, well, a lot of people, especially conservatives, usually say against liberty, that was, if not the main word, one of the main words that they were using. Okay, so that's great. Could we solve this problem by increasing freedom rather than reducing it? Puts us on the same side, no paradigmatic rules going up, and also it implies a humility, right? Because it's not saying I have the answer. Like, you don't, any specific answer you have is going to be wrong somehow if you dig it deep enough, right? So try to lead someone your way without giving yourself that difficulty of defending something specific, and that's quite a humble thing to do. And say, I need your help with this, okay? It's like you see when you trust a kid. Usually you trust people, they rise to the trust. You treat someone with humility, you usually get that back, right? Give some to get some. Give some to get some. Okay, I've said that it doesn't specify a single position. No ideology required to accept the premise of the question. We can do this together, whether we're progressive, conservative, neoconservative, liberal, libertarian, right? But we're on our ground. See, this question puts us on liberty ground, but we can all play the game. You can't reject that. There's nothing in there that you can say, well, no, 2 + 2 doesn't equal 5. It doesn't even say 2 + 2 = 4. It's a question. And this one is super important. This is kind of like a big point in itself. That if I had more time, I would discuss. But again, you know, we go off and read our preacher from Jekyll Island and our von Mises and our Austrian economics, or whatever it might be, and we kind of have our worldview, and that's kind of the direction, that's the destination we want to get to, right? This is bad. In a pure libertarian utopia, it's like this, so I'm going to keep banging on about this. No, 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 no. People can't even see that far from where they are. So don't tell them where the end of the journey is. Tell them where the next step is, just make sure the next step goes in the right direction, right? Every journey is one step at a time. Political persuasion is about persuading on direction, not destination. Yeah? There are as many utopias as there are human beings, right, if you detail them enough. Right? So let's not. Why make our lives difficult? Okay? Right? The anarchists and the minarchists and the libertarians and the, classical liberals, we all want to go the same direction. Some of us, let's get to here before we argue how much further we want to go. Okay? So that's what I'm about, right? And I understand from what you said, so what YAL is about, right? It's effective activism, right? Okay, and I've kind of mentioned this before. What you choose to talk about can be more important than what you say. Why? Because that says kind of who you are. That's your identity, what you care about. I put it this way, identities are found in shared concerns more than in shared opinions. There's a nice quote here, tell me to what you pay attention, and I will tell you who you are. Progressives tend to actually sacralize victim groups. Okay, conservatives sacralize other things. Most people sacralize something. Libertarians do as well. You get some libertarians who tie themselves up in knots because they sacralize the non-aggression principle. It's kind of interesting. If you kind of really understand this, you can see it everywhere. But I'm going to come to an example in a minute of this. The topic you choose says kind of more about who you are than the details of what you think about that topic, right? And let's be really obvious about it. If you're a religious conservative, you're not going to be talking about the troubles that afflict transsexuals in our society. Right? But there's no reason why, if you're a religious conservative, that you can't talk about that and have an opinion about it. And if you do, you've just given yourself massive ground in having a conversation against that divide. Okay? It doesn't matter what you say. By raising the topic, you're signaling, I care. I care about this. Or I care about people who deal with this. Okay, so an example I'm going to give in a minute is that you can reorder content to achieve this effect. Okay, now, so an example that's kind of maybe a little more common than the one I just given, the fact that conservatives and often libertarians don't talk enough about poverty is a good reason, per se, if you're a liberal, to discount your economic arguments as unlikely to deliver on poverty. I'm not where you are yet. I haven't read the canon, right? It may be true that your free market Austrian economic worldview is going to mean fewer poor people than there are now. But you're not talking to me about that. You're talking to me about the Federal Reserve, right? So why, from where I'm standing now, why should I really believe that's where you're going to end up? It doesn't even sound like your intent. Okay, be sensitive to that. Okay, let me just, here's the example. Okay, so this is kind of an example I've just given. Here's two statements. They basically have the same content, but they have completely different impacts, right? I'm a capitalist because I'm for freedom, and capitalism is the best way of reducing poverty. Broadly speaking, I think we all say that's true. I'm for reducing poverty, and so support the freedom of people to trade for mutual benefit, and that to me is what capitalism is. Actually, a completely different effect. You've just established completely different common ground. Okay, you've started in different places and gone in different directions. The one on the left is about capitalism. Right? It's saying, I'm concerned with about this thing called capitalism, and it might put you on the political right. The one on the left, the one on the right, I shouldn't switch those around, should I? The one on the right is actually, it's a statement about poverty, but it has the same content, right? None of them actually make more of a forceful argument. None of them really are arguments. They invite a discussion about an argument, but this is going to have a completely different effect if you're speaking to your liberal friends, for example. Okay. So let's, now I'm going to kind of go to town on it a little bit more. So I'm against the welfare state because it doesn't work, it destroys compassion, it increases poverty, ... This is probably a discussion that many of you have got in. Often, okay, how can we reframe that? I'm concerned about the loss of compassion for the poorest in our society. We all are, actually. We all are. I'm concerned how one-size-fits-all programs don't take into account the circumstances of suffering Americans. They don't provide opportunities, disincentivize the very actions that would help people the most. That's why we need a welfare system with better targeting and incentives. I would drive decision-making down towards those whose lives welfare affects. Okay, the second one is better. Why? Let's analyze it a bit. Okay, so it's signaling your concern. It's putting you on the side of the person you're trying to, whose mind you're trying to change. I've got a lecture on moral dimensions, how basically liberals and libertarians and conservatives, we live in different moral worlds that can be understood in terms of different moral dimensions, of which there are broadly 6. The driving dimension for progressive people on the left is the care versus harm dimension, right? You can reduce evaluations of most policies by folks on the left to an assessment in terms of that spectrum. The more it appears to be caring, the better it is. Okay, so if you're speaking to folks on the left, if you're saying that you're concerned, well, that's moral intent right there. Concern is what they do. You're talking about compassion, that's what they do, self-identifying in their paradigm. And the poorest in our society, those most hurt, right, the care versus harm dimension. I mean, you're speaking left at that point, right? That's a progressive sentence, basically, right? Okay. I'm concerned how one-size-fits-all programs don't take into account the circumstances of suffering Americans. Okay, it's caring because you're talking about suffering Americans. You're using the vocabulary of the paradigm into which you're trying to sell. It's also empirical, it's not an ideological statement, right? One-size-fits-all programs don't take into account the circumstances of suffering Americans. That's an empirical statement. It's either true or false. You can have a factual discussion, right? But it's not one that can be refuted ideologically, right? Even most people on the left are concerned that our delivery of welfare can be better, right? We agree, common ground. Okay. Suffering Americans, empathic, we touched on that one already. Here we are with the caring again. It's the progressive moral dimension. It's the, that moral intentional axis of politics. So we're saying they don't provide opportunities but disincentivize the very actions that would help people the most. We're talking help people the most. These phrases are phrases that progressives say we need to start saying them if we're talking to progressives. And I could do different examples, obviously, if I was talking to folks, religious conservative folks. And by the way, one of the best speeches I've ever done along these lines was actually to very strong religious conservative folks about abortion. And I think I was the only pro-choice person in the room. So check that one out on YouTube, because that's really an example. And by the way, I use pro-choice kind of carefully. Probably not what you mean by that, like I would need to qualify that, but that was kind of the whole point of the speech. Okay. Anyway, so back to talking to our progressive friends. So that's why we need a welfare system with better targeting incentives. Okay. I'm using the word welfare system. Okay, I'm on their ground, right? Guess what? The free market is a really awesome welfare system. I'm not conceding anything by using the term. Okay, let's talk. I'm on their ground. I'm respecting them enough. Let's have that discussion. We don't commit to a meaning by saying it, right? Same with social justice, same with economic justice. Okay. And again, it's a caring statement, okay? I would drive decision-making down towards those whose lives welfare affects. Okay, so again, direction, not destination. Okay, I'm not saying, all of the decision-making has to be here and there and here, because someone finds one mistake of that, then they can, must I believe it versus can I believe it? I don't need to believe it, I won't. Okay, but this is a much more kind of inclusive and effective approach. Okay. That's it. You see only what you know, and remember, judgment and justification are completely different processes, and I'm happy to take questions and answers. I hope you enjoyed that.